So this Financial Times that we discussed in part A has got these stupid letters. One by Geoffrey Roberts, Emeritus Professor of History, University College Cork in Ireland. And another is by Rosario Iaconis, who is described as adjunct professor, Social Sciences Department, Suffolk County Community College, Brentwood, New York, USA. And these are stupid letters typical of the corruption of the Financial Times and by the Financial Times, which boasts at the editorial column as the main banner, without fear and without favor, which is absolutely untrue. The Financial Times has been lying, publishing lies throughout its existence. And this one, as we started, bold reform for a post-Brexit Britain. Now, this is the line that is being also promoted by the European, which is the weekly title that was allegedly set up to oppose Brexit. It came out very shortly after the Brexit result of the Brexit so-called referendum in June 2016. The European is, again, although it's not a typical Fleet Street daily newspaper, but it is written mostly by people who are former Fleet Street employees and journalists and so-called careerists who claim to be opposed to Brexit. But everything in it is typically corrupt, ignorant, and it could be found in any of the daily titles included in Fleet Street. So no wonder that its first weekly edition in the new year, so-called 2021, is echoing the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, the Sun, the Daily Borisgraph, and is similar to the Guardian line. It's very similar in the style to the Guardian line. We said earlier that we would look at the Daily Mail, and it is astonishing. Daily Mail today has got this unbelievably, dishonestly kind of decided piece about Grenfell Tower, of all things. But it is misleading because although it says that millions are stuck with fire-trapped homes after Grenfell, they are hit by £2 billion bill for safety work and insurance. Now, that is apparently relatively kind of innocent until its next line is read. As cladding crisis rocks entire housing market. That is the line. It's not the safety of the people that the Daily Mail is running this completely misleading headline, because the misleading in the sense that it misleads readers, or is capable of misleading most readers into thinking at first that it is concerned about the safety of the residents, but that's not the case. It's abusing the injustice as the marketing ploy, as the thing to do with selling houses. That is the market. Because the market for housing in buildings that are affected by the lack of fire safety kind of measures are not selling, because people are concerned about the prospect of fire being allowed to affect and endanger lives because of the lack of safety measures. Think about that. That is why the Daily Mail is running this investigation. So the Daily Mail is lying. And it has got page 2 devoted to the same thing, and also another spread, which is that is the one, the 2-page spread on the pages, inside pages 12 and 13. This will mislead readers into thinking that the Daily Mail cares about the safety of people in those buildings. But it doesn't. It cares about the market, the housing market, so-called, that is affected. So it's got pages 12, 13, 14, and 15. So it has got 6 pages for front page, and the inside another 5 pages full of apparent concern, but it's concerned about the market, not about housing. And there is a piece about Tony Blair, Tony Blair not being made a knight by the monarch Brenda, and they are saying that it's to do with the apparent antics by Blair over Diana when Diana was murdered. Well, it doesn't say murdered, but that is the majority opinion. And the stupidity of the Daily Mail is in the piece about Gary Marsden, the frontman of the record-breaking 60s chart toppers, Jerry and the Pacemakers. And the headline is Rail Clark's son, who became a buddy of the Beatles. Now that is so stupid, it is beyond words to condemn it. Why should the fact that his father was a rail clerk, and how being a buddy of the Beatles elevates him. What made the Beatles prevail on a higher level than him? That is the stupidity of the Daily Mail. Now, we said that we'll talk about the Daily Mail's additional stupidity about promoting Boris Johnson, and we shall look for that item and we shall find it and we shall then expose the Daily Mail of today as an idiotic paper. They are saying, they're reporting quite brazenly and contradict. The brazenness is in the contradiction of the facts that they are carrying themselves about the rise in the virus spread. Well, it's not, the headline that we are looking for is probably in the Sun. Essentially, what the Sun, the scum, the Murdoch scum is saying is that Johnson is saying that the schools are safe. And we shall look for the scum and find it. If it is safe, then why is there lockdown elsewhere in the country, everywhere else in the country? That is the yes. Look at this one. He's saying it's safe to go to school. How stupid is that? If it is safe to go to school, then why are most people not being allowed to go to work? Why is there a tier 4 lockdown everywhere? And why is there talk, in fact, for imposing even the higher level of the lockdown, which is tier 5? So when we say we diagnose Fleet Street, we actually mean Fleet Street contends to be sick, literally sick, sick-makingly corrupt and dishonest and contradictory and dangerous and irresponsible and negligent. That's what we mean. Now, Now here is the other contradiction in the Financial Times, the corruption by the Financial Times. It makes a kind of patronizing comment about Germany. And in that patronizing comment about Germany being not a right place for protecting the shareholders' interests and the corporate management being allowed to be outside of the range of accountability to the shareholders. That's actually the case in Britain as well. In fact, it is worse in Britain than in Germany. But let's look at let's look at the two paragraphs of this piece by somebody called Robert Perez, P-E-R-E-S, Perez. Now, Robert Perez is the head of Minority Shareholders Initiative, another capitalist crook. Now, the Wirecard affair, we shall discuss the Wirecard affair later. The Wirecard affair, the latest in a series of corporate scandals in Germany, raises an important question. Why does Germany find it so difficult to protect investors? Those outside the country, that is outside of Germany, who admire the Rhineland model for its seemingly enlightened form of capitalism should examine the Wirecard collapse in detail. We shall examine the Wirecard scandal in detail as well, but let's read on. From my perspective, that is this Robert Perez saying that the chief problem of German corporate governance is that shareholders lack the power to hold the management or hold management accountable. Wirecard shareholders tried to question Markus Braun, the chief executive, at annual general meetings, but they did not have a chance to grill him. German law makes it easy for a company's board members to evade awkward questions by talking in platitudes. Now, all of that applies to British corporate power and impunity given by British law, which is a joke. So it's capitalist corruption and capitalist stupidity in the Financial Times. And all the other pieces in the Financial Times are full of platitudes and full of contradictions and full of corrupt purpose, which is to deprive the overwhelming majority of the public that they fleece and exploit and rob and loot of any say in how the looters and robbers and exploiters go on doing this. Now, this is the way that the Murdoch scum is celebrating today. Ahead of the day, they say army help in COVID fight. And the Daily Mail is actually against the lockdown. So what the Daily Mail is doing is acting as a propaganda agent for those forces that want to expose the ordinary public to risk of the virus. That is what it is. Its role is. That's what the role it's playing, and it's not alone. It's the Murdoch scum and the Boris Graph. But the Boris Graph, the Daily Boris Graph, has got again an appearance of being serious without actually being serious. Boris Graf is saying threat of national lockdown looms again. Although it says threat, I mean, that is the same line as the Daily Mail is running. It's actually the contents are contradicting that fear of lockdown. It is actually supporting the warnings given by most people that are familiar with the kind of information about the spread of the virus, although they are not sharing that information with the public by talking about the A to Z of the behavior of the virus, as we have been saying in this program for months. They are actually admitting that the virus is dangerous and it is on a runaway scale of spreading highly. More kind of numbers of people infected every single day. And there is the center of the evidence of lying and negligence and criminal irresponsibility and criminal intent on the part of the Johnson-fronted cabal to expose as many people as possible to the virus. If that were not the intent, why else is this cabal of criminals saying on the one hand that the virus is increasing, the spread is increasing, including the fact that it's overwhelming the existing NHS facilities, thus causing the need to bring into action or service those Nightingale hospitals that were very speedily set up in April last year. On the one hand, Johnson is saying the schools are safe, and on the other, he's saying that the virus is spreading faster. You could not make plainer the stupidity and negligence and idiocy and lack of fitness on the part of Johnson and his cabal to claim to be the legitimate governors of the or government of the country, which they're exposing to this kind of lies and lying and falsehood and misleading. And also there is a news that children, there is an item in one of the papers that children spread the virus faster than adults. Now they're saying that, and that is an item of information that should legitimately worry people. But they're not saying why that is happening. And the fact that they're not saying why that is happening is another item of proof and evidence that they are failing and they're lying and they're negligent, they're unfit, they're not fit for purpose. They're not fit to be called government. The fundamental basis on which any cabal can claim to be the legitimate group of people to form the government of the day is evidence or the requirement on them to produce evidence by serving the people's needs, protecting people, saving lives. But with this lot, they cannot be doing this because they're all over the place. That is to say, they're contradicting themselves in 5-6 directions every single time. So even if the people were prepared to let the cabal assume a basis of legitimacy for the time being, let's say for the sake of argument, the people cannot be getting the service because they're getting 5, 6, 7 different directions of direction and order and information which when put together amounts to misinformation, which is dangerous in a situation of pandemic, a crisis, like the crisis that we have been facing for the last almost a year now. And just to put it in the international perspective, the jubilation at the coming delivery of large numbers of vaccinations must be tempered with the evidence all across the world that people are very genuinely concerned about the effectiveness and the safety of the vaccine itself. People are saying that it has been rushed. And the latest case that we have noticed is in India. The Indian campaigners for safety of drug use have branded as shocking the Narendra Modi regime's speedy, very fast approval of the Oxford kind of vaccine at speed that is unsafe, according to the campaigners in India. And India is typical of the countries that have got people warning the governments about the vaccine rush and vaccine and other measures that are completely irresponsibly being imposed or spread, and the information kind of fakery that is going on in India and in other countries. And as for Europe, the EU countries, apparently the EU is being blamed for not having enough doses of the vaccine because it didn't order enough. Now that is the stupidity of the most stupid of the stupid items of the day. The EU is not one country. The morons who are blaming the EU for not ordering. The EU could not order as a whole. It's individual countries that are responsible for the order, the number, the amount of the stock, and everything else. Now, how can they say they're concerned about the safety of the schools and the children when they're putting the blame on the unions and the local councils for being genuinely concerned about the safety of not only children, but of the staff, teachers, and other people who are employed to run the schools. And they're giving unjustifiable degree of coverage, positive coverage, to this moron, this incompetent liar. And there is a piece in the Daily Borisgraph as well about Grenfell Tower. And they are saying that Grenfell cladding chiefs hiding behind foreign law to avoid inquiry. Grenfell cladding firm executives should step up and appear before the inquiry rather than hiding behind French law, a government minister has demanded. Now, the fact that it's a government minister who has described this cowardly behavior by the executives of the cladding company, then it shows things are very bad indeed. And it's 3 years now. It happened in June 2017. So 18, 19, 20, it's 3 years in the fourth calendar year now. We are into the fourth calendar year since the Grenfell Tower massacre. And none of the people in the Kensington and Chelsea Council that was responsible for the negligence has been held to account. And the fact that there is this inquiry, and as we have said, and as we shall continue to say about inquiries like that, inquiries in this country, in Britain, in the UK, are a corrupt way of avoiding responsibility for disasters, for abuses, mass rapes, mass violations. So if the Rhineland model is at fault in Germany about the Wirecard card kind of scandal, etc., then 1,000-fold blames can be laid at the doors of the companies and corporations and the government of the UK. The UK is the biggest offshore kind of market for the world's biggest crooks and criminals to launder money through. So although Keir Starmer, the so-called opposition leader, has for the first time been featured today as calling for a national lockdown over the increase in the spread of the virus, because that is against the fact that he's absolutely absent from being reported, because he has not made any impact in terms of even getting his message against the unfit government through the media, so-called. So although he's asking now for national, he's saying what he means by national is UK-wide. Unless, of course, he means only affecting England. Although he's saying that, even if it's England or if it's UK-wide, makes no significant difference in terms of the call. Although he's saying that, Starmer has not been saying anything about this big corruption, the big island of corruption that the UK has become for over the last few decades. And with Brexit, it's doomed to get worse. And the worse it gets as a offshore island, the biggest offshore island, offshore kind of money laundering territory for the world's biggest crooks and money launderers, the worse it will be for the ordinary people in Britain, the many. Because the preoccupation of the money launderers is to launder as much money as they can and to fleece as many people as they can. So the correlation between the disappearance or weakening or undermining of regulation, and all the regulations in the UK have been very weak to begin with on all financial matters. The undermining of regulation means the undermining of the rights of the ordinary people, because the less regulation there is of the criminals, the less access to rights and opportunities will be available to the most in need. And that includes millions of people affected by lack of housing, human rights, lack of basic human rights, lack of access to the remedies through the judicial process, and other alleged forms of accountability. And this particular analysis that I've just summarized is not available anywhere in any of the papers. It's not available anywhere in any of the statements or policy positions stated by the so-called opposition leader or from any opposition MPs or members of the House of Peers. In other words, this is genuinely, literally, yet another world exclusive statement of service being brought to you, whoever is watching this and whenever they're watching this, from London by the Khoodeelaar campaign, defending the community in the East End of London and defending the universal values and rights from the East End of London. So this is Monday, the 4th of January, 2021, and this is part 2 of the world exclusive Khoodeelaar campaign, diagnosing Fleet Street. When we say we diagnose Fleet Street, we of course include the fact that we examine the various elements and factors and facts that Fleet Street promotes and suppresses, hides, and its role overall. And that includes, of course, the behavior of the government, the behavior of parliament, behavior of the others concerned, including especially the pharma companies, big pharma companies. And the big pharma conglomerates are behind this rush that has been pointed out by the anti-drugs abuse campaigners in India. Because the big pharmas stand to gain billions by selling their things and promoting their kind of commodities, if you like, to the market like India. And they're doing the same thing in principle in terms of the policy and technique in the case of Britain. And the Fleet Street papers are carrying the propaganda of the pharma companies. It's being done via Boris Johnson, but it's not done just for Boris Johnson's kind of position and status as the fronter of the cabal so-called government of Britain. Boris Johnson too is a stooge of the big pharma conglomerates. And there is concern about the shocking COVID vaccine race, desperation by China exposed. That is a piece that is dated the 28th of September 2020. And they are saying in that piece in September, they said that Chinese authorities are making plans to give vaccine shots at an even larger scale in a big gamble that the vaccines will eventually be proven to be effective. Now, there is no update on that particular story that is accessible at this minute, but the point is the same, that the vaccines are the subject of serious concern worldwide from very large numbers of people. And the concern is proven correct and justifiable by the fact that everywhere governments have been rushing the vaccine. And the rush is irresponsible, unsafe, for the simple reason that majority of the vaccines that are created or the drugs that are created, for them to be safe, there has to be far longer periods of testing, the laboratory testing of the thing, and the safety of the thing, and the effectiveness of the thing, and the measuring of the risks of side effects, dangerous side effects included. And we come back to the same thing again, that the Fleet Street papers are part of the same kind of agenda that the broadcasting counterparts like the BBC, Sky News, ITV, Channel 4 News, and Channel 5 News, etc., are responsible for, because they are doing the hiding for the government and for the pharma companies. What is the evidence and what is the actual kind of route that the virus kind of travels? What does it do from A to Z? As we keep saying, the government knows the data, the pharma companies know the data, and the various institutions know the data, but they're not sharing their knowledge with the ordinary public, who are the main ones that are exposed to the risks of ignorance. And instead of militarizing the kind of action, information and education, in terms of the education meaning the basic knowledge about the virus, would be much more effective.